You can laugh at the man standing quietly in the corner, someone said with a grin. But be careful if he never feels the need to answer. The laughter rolled across the polished training floor of Hayes Global Security Headquarters, echoing beneath the glass ceiling as dozens of elite candidates stretched, chatted, and admired themselves in the mirrored walls. Every applicant wore tactical gear that looked fresh from expensive catalogs, decorated with military patches, championship logos, and years of carefully displayed achievements. Then the front doors opened, and the room grew louder for all the wrong reasons. A man in a faded brown work jacket stepped inside, carrying a weathered duffel bag over one shoulder. His boots had seen too many winters, and a small stain of engine grease rested near one cuff, as if he had come straight from another job. His name was Ethan Walker, 42 years old, a single father. Nothing about him looked extraordinary. He paused just inside the doorway, quietly studying the room before signing his name at the registration desk with calm, steady handwriting. Behind him, someone chuckled. Did maintenance get lost? Another voice answered. Maybe he's here to fix the air conditioning. More laughter followed, louder this time. Ethan simply thanked the receptionist and walked toward the waiting area without looking at anyone who had spoken. His silence somehow made the joke sound even smaller. Across the massive training facility, Victoria Hayes watched everything from an elevated observation balcony. At 36, she had built one of the most respected private security companies in America after inheriting a global technology empire from her late father. Newspapers called her the billionaire CEO who trusted preparation over luck. Today she was searching for one person worthy of leading her personal protection team. Hundreds had applied. Only one position existed. She folded her arms as her chief of security handed her the candidate roster. Former special forces, state champions, federal contractors, executive protection experts, he said confidently before stopping on the final page. Then there's Ethan Walker. Victoria glanced down. The resume looked almost empty. Occupation, father. Current employment, night security and auto repair. Certifications, basic civilian licenses. She raised one eyebrow. That's all. Apparently. Interesting, she murmured, though not in the way Ethan might have hoped. Down below, candidates continued introducing themselves. One man proudly listed every tactical school he had attended. Another spoke about protecting celebrities. A decorated martial arts instructor demonstrated flawless balance while others applauded. Ethan remained seated quietly near the back, resting both hands on his duffel bag, listening more than speaking. The confidence surrounding him felt loud, almost competitive. It felt different. It was the kind that never asked to be noticed. A young female competitor walked past and glanced at Ethan's jacket before smiling politely, though the smile carried more amusement than kindness. Sir, she said, the family visitor entrance is on the other side of the building. Several people laughed again. Ethan looked up with gentle eyes. Thank you, he replied. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. She shrugged and walked away, convinced he simply didn't understand what kind of place this was. Above them, Victoria watched that brief exchange without emotion. She had seen thousands of applicants over the years. Confidence was common. Quiet confidence usually disappeared the moment real pressure arrived. A sharp electronic tone suddenly echoed across the facility as every conversation stopped. The first round of evaluations was about to begin. No one noticed Ethan slowly removing his old jacket and folding it with surprising care before placing it neatly inside his bag. No one noticed the faded silver ring resting on a chain around his neck. And no one could have guessed that the quiet single dad everyone had mistaken for the wrong man had just stepped into the only room in America where his forgotten past was about to find him again. Ethan stood with the rest of the applicants as an instructor wearing a black haze global security polo stepped onto the center mat with a digital tablet in one hand. His voice carried naturally across the enormous room without ever becoming loud. Welcome to the first evaluation. Today is not about proving who is the strongest. It is about judgment, discipline, observation, and the ability to remain calm when everyone else loses theirs. Several competitors exchanged confident smiles, clearly relieved that the opening test would not involve physical demonstrations. One by one, candidates were directed toward separate stations where they completed written assessments, situational analysis exercises, and observation drills designed to measure attention under pressure. Ethan quietly accepted his identification badge and walked toward his assigned table. While others rushed to finish before the timer expired, he read every instruction twice before writing his first answer. His movements were neither slow nor hurried. They were deliberate, almost peaceful. From the observation balcony, Victoria Hayes continued watching through the glass, occasionally making notes as security managers discussed the applicants below. Candidate 12 is impressive, one supervisor commented. Former federal agent. Another nodded toward a decorated athlete. Candidate 21 has outstanding tournament records. Victoria listened without much reaction until one manager pointed toward Ethan. Candidate 48 has almost no relevant credentials. He is probably here because he needs the paycheck. Victoria glanced down again. Ethan remained completely focused despite the conversations happening around him. People who need jobs usually try the hardest to impress, she said quietly. He is doing the opposite. The first exercise displayed surveillance photographs for only 30 seconds before removing them from the screens. Applicants then answered detailed questions about clothing, exits, facial expressions, and unusual objects hidden throughout the images. Several experienced candidates finished quickly, smiling with confidence. Ethan waited until nearly the final second before submitting his answers. The instructor reviewed the results in silence before looking up with visible surprise. Only one perfect score, he announced. Heads immediately turned toward the former. Agents and decorated specialists. Candidate 48. The room grew unexpectedly quiet as Ethan simply nodded once without celebrating. Someone whispered, "Lucky guess." Another applicant folded his arms. One test does not make him qualified. Ethan heard every word, yet responded to none of them. The next evaluation involved reading body language from short security videos with the audio removed. Applicants identified potential threats, emotional changes, and environmental risks before explaining their reasoning. Again, Ethan finished without drawing attention to himself. Again, the instructor paused while reviewing the answers. Highest accuracy belongs to candidate 48. This time the silence lasted longer. Even Victoria leaned slightly closer to the glass. "Pull his file again," she instructed her assistant. "There has to be more than what is written on that resume." The assistant quickly searched the company database before quietly shaking his head. Nothing significant. Employment history is ordinary. No executive protection contracts. No public military awards beyond standard honorable discharge records. Victoria Fronet Sotfelli. Interesting. Down below, the mood inside the training hall had changed. The laughter from earlier had disappeared, replaced by cautious curiosity. Ethan calmly accepted a paper cup of water, thanked the volunteer who handed it to him, and moved back toward the waiting area. As he sat down, his phone vibrated softly inside his jacket pocket. He smiled for the first time that morning when he saw a picture of his 12-year-old daughter on the screen beside a simple message that read, "Good luck, Dad. You already won because you showed up." Ethan looked at the photograph for a quiet moment before placing the phone back into his pocket. He did not know whether he would earn the job. He only knew that someone believed in him long before anyone else ever would. The afternoon sunlight stretched through the towering glass walls as the remaining applicants gathered near the central training floor where the next phase would finally test composure under real pressure. The instructors wheeled in movable barriers, security checkpoints, communication equipment, and several volunteers who had been hired to play confused executives, nervous employees, and unpredictable visitors. It looked less like a competition and more like a normal workday inside the headquarters of someone whose safety depended on every decision being correct. One by one, candidates stepped into carefully designed scenarios. Some spoke too quickly. Others focused on the loudest distraction while quietly missing the most important detail, standing only a few feet away. A few impressive resumes suddenly looked much less impressive when unexpected problems unfolded before them. Ethan waited patiently for his turn, hands resting comfortably at his sides, never shifting nervously like many of the others. His breathing remained slow, almost effortless. From the observation balcony, Victoria Hayes leaned forward with growing curiosity. She had expected the former military officers to dominate every exercise, yet the quiet single father continued climbing the rankings without drawing attention to himself. "How does someone with that background keep seeing things our professionals miss?" she asked. Her operations director adjusted his glasses before answering. "Some people are trained to react. Others are trained to notice. Those are not always the same skill." Victoria remained silent as Ethan entered the simulated executive lobby. A volunteer hurried toward him, pretending to be an anxious employee carrying several boxes. At the same moment, another actor argued loudly with a receptionist while someone else accidentally dropped a briefcase near the entrance. Most candidates before Ethan had rushed toward the loud argument. Ethan did not. His eyes calmly moved across the entire room before settling on a maintenance cart parked beside an emergency exit. One wheel remained unlocked, leaving the heavy cart positioned where it could easily roll into a crowded walkway. Without making a dramatic announcement, he quietly secured the wheel before assisting the employee carrying the boxes and then politely asking the receptionist if she needed support with a disruptive visitor. When the exercise ended, the lead instructor smiled for the first time all afternoon. Candidate 48 was the only applicant who identified the hidden safety hazard before engaging the stage conflict. Several competitors looked confused. One muttered under his breath, "Who cares about a cart?" The instructor answered before anyone else could speak. Professional protection begins long before emergencies happen. Preventing danger is always better than responding to it. Ethan simply thanked him and stepped aside. The comments behind him grew sharper. "He keeps getting lucky. These are not real security problems. Wait until someone actually challenges him." Standing near the equipment racks was Brandon Cross, the company favorite and the reigning defensive tactics champion who had spent years protecting wealthy clients around the world. Tall, confident, and respected by nearly everyone in the building, Brandon had remained mostly quiet throughout the earlier evaluations. Now he watched Ethan with narrowed eyes before walking toward him with a friendly smile that somehow felt colder than the earlier laughter. "You have had a good morning," Brandon said, extending his hand. Ethan accepted the handshake with calm courtesy. "Thank you." Brandon nodded slowly. Observation tests are interesting, but leadership requires something different. Eventually, every bodyguard has to prove that people can trust him when everything becomes unpredictable. Ethan met his gaze without changing expression. "That is true." Brandon smiled again. "Good. I hope we both make it to the final evaluation." Ethan released the handshake. "So do I." Above them, Victoria noticed something subtle. Brandon had approached Ethan expecting uncertainty, perhaps even intimidation. Instead, the quiet father had answered every word with simple respect, never challenging him, never shrinking from him either. For reasons she could not yet explain, Victoria found herself watching Ethan more closely than any other applicant. She still believed there had to be a story hidden behind the ordinary resume, and somewhere deep inside, she began to wonder whether the quietest man in the room had not yet revealed the strongest part of himself. The final announcement before the afternoon evaluations echoed through the training hall, and every conversation immediately faded into silence. The lead instructor stepped onto the center floor with a calm expression that carried quiet authority. "The next exercise measures controlled response under uncertainty. You're not being judged by speed alone. You're being judged by judgment." Several applicants exchanged confident smiles. They had spent years believing faster always meant better. Ethan remained where he stood, listening without moving a muscle. The instructors divided the remaining candidates into small groups and led them through a series of dynamic security scenarios built inside movable office spaces. Executives suddenly changed directions without warning. Volunteers interrupted conversations with urgent requests. Security radios crackled with conflicting reports. Doors opened unexpectedly. Elevators arrived on different floors than scheduled. Every detail demanded attention without creating panic. Brandon Cross entered first. His performance looked polished and decisive. He confidently directed volunteers, repositioned team members, and quickly responded to every visible distraction. Several instructors nodded with approval as he completed the exercise. Applause spread quietly through the room. Brandon accepted the recognition with an appreciative smile before stepping aside. That, one applicant whispered, is what a professional looks like. Ethan entered moments later. The simulated office remained completely still for nearly 15 seconds. He did not rush toward anyone. Instead, his eyes calmly traveled across windows, hallways, stairwells, exits, reflections in polished glass, and the positioning of every person inside the room. The silence almost appeared uncomfortable to those watching, but Ethan never seemed concerned by it. Then the exercise began. A volunteer portraying an executive unexpectedly changed her destination after receiving a pretend phone call. Two delivery workers entered from opposite directions, carrying large boxes that partially blocked visibility. At nearly the same moment, another actor approached, asking for directions, while a maintenance employee rolled equipment through a nearby corridor. Instead of reacting to each distraction individually, Ethan quietly repositioned himself so he maintained a clear line of sight to every moving group without making anyone feel uncomfortable. His movements appeared ordinary enough that several observers barely noticed them. Then one instructor intentionally dropped a clipboard behind him. Ethan did not turn. He simply said, "Someone behind me just needs a moment." There is no immediate concern. The instructor smiled without responding. A second later, another evaluator attempted to draw Ethan toward an argument taking place across the room. Ethan politely acknowledged the disturbance, but never abandoned the person he had been assigned to protect. When the scenario ended, the evaluation team exchanged long glances before reviewing their notes. Finally, the lead instructor addressed the room. Candidate 48 maintained visual awareness of every active variable while avoiding unnecessary escalation. He completed the assignment without creating additional stress for the principal. One applicant frowned. He barely did anything. The instructor looked directly at him. Exactly. The best protection often feels invisible. A thoughtful silence settled over the room. Even Brandon crossed his arms as he replayed Ethan's decisions in his own mind. They had not been dramatic. They had simply been correct. From the observation balcony, Victoria Hayes slowly closed the folder resting in front of her. She no longer looked at Ethan with skepticism. She looked at him with genuine curiosity. Have legal search archived military records, she quietly instructed her assistant. Expand beyond standard databases. The assistant hesitated. There is no reason to believe he held a significant command. Victoria kept watching Ethan below. Maybe not, she answered softly. But people do not develop instincts like that by accident. Down on the training floor, Ethan stepped away from the exercise area and poured himself another small cup of water. His phone vibrated once more. This time, it was a photograph his daughter had taken that morning before school, smiling beside an old pickup truck with one handwritten sentence beneath it. "No matter what happens today, I am already proud of you." Ethan smiled gently before locking the screen again. Around him, whispers continued spreading through the room. The laughter from earlier had disappeared completely. In its place came something far more powerful. Respect had not arrived yet, but curiosity had. And sometimes curiosity was the first quiet step toward changing every opinion in the room. The instructors gathered the remaining applicants at the center of the training hall as the late afternoon sun painted long golden reflections across the polished floor. The atmosphere felt different now. Earlier there had been laughter, whispered jokes, and quiet arrogance. Now every face carried the seriousness of people beginning to realize that the competition had become much harder than expected. The lead instructor waited until the room settled before speaking. "You have all demonstrated observation, judgment, and situational awareness. The next evaluation will measure another quality that cannot be taught in a classroom. He paused just long enough for everyone to lean forward. Trust. Several applicants exchanged puzzled glances. Brandon Cross folded his arms confidently, already expecting another opportunity to prove why he had been considered the favorite from the beginning. The instructor continued. A professional protector must earn confidence from both teammates and clients. Sometimes that confidence is built under pressure. Today, each finalist will complete one controlled demonstration with another candidate. Quiet conversations immediately spread through the room. Everyone understood what that meant. Victoria Hayes remained on the observation balcony with her executive team, watching every reaction instead of every word. She had spent years building successful companies because she believed people revealed their true character before they revealed their true abilities. One security manager leaned toward her. Brandon has this in the bag. He has won every company evaluation for 3 straight years. Victoria nodded slightly, but never looked away from Ethan standing quietly near the back of the room. Perhaps, she answered, but confidence sometimes becomes comfortable. Comfortable people stop learning. Down below, applicants drew numbered cards from a black container to determine the order of the demonstrations. Brandon smiled as he opened his card. Number 1. Several competitors congratulated him before glancing toward Ethan, who quietly unfolded his own card without changing expression. Number 2. Brandon noticed and walked over with the same polished confidence he had displayed all day. Looks like we will both be on the floor today, he said pleasantly. Ethan returned the smile with calm respect. It appears that way. Brandon nodded once. I have watched you all afternoon. You have excellent instincts. Ethan thanked him politely. Brandon continued, lowering his voice just enough to keep the conversation private. These demonstrations are different from observation tests. People expect leadership. Sometimes leadership means showing everyone where the standard really is. Ethan listened carefully before answering. Leadership also means helping people leave better than they arrived. Brandon gave a quiet laugh. That is a good philosophy. He extended his hand once again. May the best candidate win. Ethan shook his hand firmly. I hope whoever earns the position serves well. As Brandon walked away, several applicants whispered among themselves. He's being nice now because he knows this is over. Another replied, once the demonstration starts, the mechanic goes home. Ethan heard the comments, but focused instead on carefully removing his watch and placing it inside his duffel bag beside the folded photograph of his daughter. He treated every personal belonging with the same quiet care he seemed to give every conversation. Above him, Victoria noticed the small gesture. Look at that, she murmured. Her assistant followed her gaze. What are you seeing? Victoria answered thoughtfully. Most people prepare for a challenge by thinking about themselves. He prepared by protecting something important to him first. Moments later, the lead instructor returned to the center of the floor. Candidates Brandon Cross and Ethan Walker, please report to the demonstration area. The enormous training hall became completely still as every conversation ended at once. Employees stopped organizing equipment. Applicants stepped back behind the marked lines. Even the instructors exchanged quiet looks filled with anticipation. Brandon confidently walked toward the center mat with relaxed shoulders and an easy smile earned through years of success. Ethan followed several steps behind at the same steady pace he had maintained since the moment he entered the building that morning. There was no sign of fear. There was no sign of pride. Only the quiet composure of a father who had long ago learned that the strongest person in the room rarely needed everyone else to know it. Brandon Cross stepped onto the center mat with the relaxed confidence of a man who had nothing left to prove. Applause drifted through the training hall from employees who had watched him lead demonstrations for years. Ethan Walker entered a moment later, stopping just inside the marked boundary before offering Brandon a respectful nod. The lead instructor raised one hand to quiet the room. This is a controlled evaluation. The objective is not domination. The objective is judgment, balance, restraint, and control. The candidate who demonstrates the highest level of professional discipline will receive the highest score. Brandon smiled warmly. Ready? Ethan answered with the same calm voice he had used all day. Whenever you are. The signal sounded. Neither man rushed forward. Brandon circled lightly with practiced footwork, studying Ethan from every angle. Ethan remained almost perfectly still, adjusting only enough to keep Brandon comfortably within view. Several applicants whispered from the sidelines. "Why is he not moving?" Another quietly replied, "Because he does not know what to do." Up on the observation balcony, Victoria Hayes narrowed her eyes. She noticed something different. Ethan was not frozen. He was waiting. Brandon took another careful step before reaching forward with a controlled movement intended to test Ethan's balance rather than overwhelm him. Ethan shifted only inches, redirecting the contact. With almost effortless precision, Brandon immediately regained his footing and smiled with genuine surprise. The room grew quieter. Brandon changed direction, increasing the pace while exploring different angles, but every attempt was answered by the same quiet efficiency. Ethan never chased him. He never appeared rushed. He simply occupied the right place at exactly the right moment. The instructors exchanged thoughtful glances. One of them quietly wrote several notes before looking toward the observation balcony. Victoria never took her eyes off the floor below. Brandon's expression slowly changed from confidence to concentration. For the first time that afternoon, he stopped smiling. He understood something that the audience did not. Ethan was reading every movement before it fully developed. Brandon adjusted once more, attempting a faster combination of controlled training techniques that demonstrated excellent athletic ability without placing either participant at unnecessary risk. Ethan calmly stepped aside, guided Brandon's momentum past him, and lightly redirected his balance with remarkable timing. Brandon lowered one knee to the mat before immediately placing one hand on the floor to steady himself. No harsh impact echoed through the room. No unnecessary force appeared. It happened so smoothly that several spectators blinked, unsure they had seen it correctly. Complete silence settled across the training hall. Brandon looked up for a brief moment, then accepted Ethan's offered hand without hesitation. Ethan helped him stand with the same quiet respect he had shown everyone since arriving that morning. "Thank you," Brandon said sincerely. Ethan nodded. "You pushed me to stay focused." The lead instructor stepped forward, visibly impressed. Demonstration complete. No applause followed. The room remained almost unbelievably still as everyone processed what they had witnessed. Brandon, the company's most respected defensive tactics specialist, had not been embarrassed. He had not been humiliated. He had simply encountered someone whose control operated at an entirely different level. Victoria slowly rose from her chair on the observation balcony. Her chief of security looked toward her. "That should not have happened." Victoria answered softly without looking away from Ethan. "No, it happened exactly the way it was supposed to." Below, Brandon faced the other applicants before speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Do not mistake quiet for weakness." He turned toward Ethan again. "Where did you learn control like that?" Ethan paused for only a second before answering with gentle honesty. "From people who taught me that the safest fight is the one that never becomes one." No one laughed this time. No one whispered another joke. The same room that had mocked the quiet single father only hours earlier now stood in respectful silence. And for Victoria Hayes, the unanswered question was no longer whether Ethan Walker belonged there. The only question that remained was who he had truly been before he chose the quiet life everyone had mistaken for ordinary. The training hall slowly came back to life, but the energy had changed in a way no scorecard could explain. Conversations that had once been filled with confidence were now replaced by thoughtful silence. Brandon Cross stood near the center mat, speaking quietly with the instructors, occasionally glancing toward Ethan Walker with unmistakable respect. Ethan, however, did not remain to enjoy the attention. He simply picked up his folded jacket, thanked the volunteers who had assisted throughout the afternoon, and walked toward a quiet corner where he poured another cup of water. It was almost as though nothing remarkable had happened. High above the floor, Victoria Hayes finally turned away from the observation window. "Bring me everything you can find on Ethan Walker," she instructed her executive assistant. "Already searching," the assistant replied while typing rapidly across multiple secure databases. Seconds passed. Then another minute. The assistant frowned. This is unusual. Victoria looked over. What is it? His public employment history matches the resume exactly. Auto repair, night security, temporary contract work, honorable military discharge over a decade ago. Victoria folded her arms. That does not explain today. No, it does not. The assistant opened another government archive available through the company's executive security partnership. A message immediately appeared across the screen. Access restricted. Higher authorization required. The assistant blinked twice before trying another search using Ethan's full legal name, date of birth, and military service number. The same message appeared again. Restricted access. Victoria had built international companies worth billions of dollars. She possessed security clearances that opened doors most corporate leaders never knew existed. Yet Ethan Walker's records remained locked behind another level entirely. Request executive verification, she said quietly. Moments later, her encrypted office phone rang. The assistant answered first before quickly handing the receiver to Victoria. It is General Nathan Collins. Victoria recognized the name immediately. The retired four-star general rarely accepted calls outside matters involving national security. General Collins, she greeted respectfully. I apologize for the unexpected interruption. The older man's voice carried calm confidence earned through decades of service. No apology is necessary, Miss Hayes. I understand you have questions regarding Ethan Walker. Victoria glanced through the observation glass where Ethan now sat alone reading another message from his daughter with a quiet smile. Yes, I believe I do. The general remained silent for a moment before speaking carefully. There are many records I cannot discuss. Victoria expected that answer. Can you tell me whether he is qualified to protect someone in my position? A soft laugh came through the speaker. Miss Hayes, if Ethan Walker accepted responsibility for your safety, I would sleep peacefully knowing you were in good hands. Victoria waited, sensing there was more. He never chased recognition, the general continued. In fact, he spent much of his career making certain no one remembered his name. Some of the finest professionals America has ever produced retire without medals the public will ever understand. Victoria asked quietly, why did he leave? Another pause filled the line. Because one day he decided that raising his daughter mattered more than becoming a legend no one could talk about. The call ended only moments later, leaving Victoria standing silently beside the darkened computer screen. She looked down through the glass once more. Ethan was laughing softly at something his daughter had texted him, completely unaware that one of the most respected military leaders in the country had just spoken about him with unmistakable admiration. He looked less like a forgotten hero than an ordinary father waiting for the school day to end. Victoria slowly closed the confidential file before anyone else could read it. The room below still saw a quiet mechanic who had surprised everyone during a company evaluation. She now saw something entirely different. She saw a man who had willingly traded extraordinary recognition for an ordinary life, and somehow that choice impressed her more than anything he had demonstrated on the training floor. The final evaluations were nearly complete when an urgent tone interrupted the quiet rhythm of the training center. It was not loud, but everyone wearing an earpiece immediately looked toward the operations desk. A security supervisor answered a radio call, listened for several seconds, and his expression changed completely. Executive movement has been advanced, he announced. Miss Hayes will be leaving through the east entrance in 5 minutes instead of 20. The room shifted in motion as employees gathered equipment and prepared for what seemed like a routine departure. Brandon Cross immediately joined the permanent security team, reviewing assignments with calm professionalism. Ethan quietly stepped aside, believing his participation had already ended. He had not yet been offered a position, and he had no intention of inserting himself where he did not belong. Victoria descended from the observation level, surrounded by advisors and company executives discussing evening meetings across the city. She thanked the instructors before walking toward the exit corridor. The building remained peaceful, yet Ethan noticed something almost no one else appeared to see. One delivery van that had arrived earlier in the afternoon was now parked. several yards closer to the executive entrance than company policy normally allowed. It might have been nothing. It might have been an honest mistake. But the position narrowed the available walkway more than necessary. Ethan quietly watched as two employees struggled to move several equipment cases near the same entrance, unintentionally creating an awkward bottleneck exactly where Victoria's group would soon pass. He walked toward the nearest supervisor without raising his voice. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Would it be helpful to clear that pathway before the executive team comes through?" The supervisor looked over, then shrugged. "Probably, but we are already behind schedule." Ethan nodded. "I can move them if you would like." "Go ahead." Without drawing attention, Ethan lifted the cases one by one, opening a wider path while greeting the employees with the same quiet courtesy he had shown throughout the day. Brandon noticed the adjustment and briefly studied the entrance again. He walked over. "You saw something?" Ethan answered honestly. "Only that people move more safely when they have more room." Brandon looked toward the parked van, then toward the narrowed sidewalk beyond the glass doors. After a moment, he quietly instructed another guard to ask the driver to relocate the vehicle farther from the entrance. The request was handled politely, and the van slowly pulled away without incident. Several minutes later, Victoria approached the doorway with her executive team. She paused when Brandon briefly explained the small changes that had been made. "Whose idea was that?" she asked. Brandon looked toward Ethan, who was helping an employee return folding chairs to a storage rack, as though he had forgotten the competition entirely. "His." Victoria watched silently as Ethan thanked the employee, held the door open for two maintenance workers, and then picked up a piece of litter someone had accidentally dropped near the entrance. There was nothing dramatic about anything he did. Every action simply made the environment calmer, safer, and easier for everyone around him. As Victoria stepped outside, she noticed how naturally people seemed to move through the cleared walkway. There was no confusion, no congestion, no unnecessary stress. She turned back toward Brandon. "Did he ever tell anyone what he used to do?" Brandon smiled faintly. "No, he only showed us who he is now." Victoria looked once more at Ethan through the glass doors. The billionaire who had spent years searching for extraordinary talent suddenly realized she had almost overlooked the rarest quality of all. Skill could impress a room. Experience could win a competition. But character quietly protected people long before they realized they needed protecting. And standing inside the lobby, carrying another box simply because someone else looked tired, the quiet single father never once seemed concerned about whether anyone had noticed. The evening sun settled low across the city skyline as the final candidates gathered one last time inside the quiet training hall. The competitive energy that had filled the building all day had faded into thoughtful anticipation. The lead instructor stepped forward holding a single folder before inviting Victoria Hayes to address the room herself. She walked slowly to the center floor without notes or prepared remarks, allowing the silence to settle before speaking. Every person here brought impressive experience, discipline, and commitment, she began. "You reminded me that excellence comes in many forms. But today I was searching for something even rarer. I was searching for someone who makes everyone around them safer without needing recognition." Her eyes moved across the room until they rested on Ethan Walker. "Mr. Walker, would you please join me?" Ethan looked briefly surprised before walking forward with the same quiet composure that had defined every moment of the day. He stopped a respectful distance away and waited. "Victoria's Maid Gormley. When you walked through those doors this morning, many people judged your jacket before they listened to your character. They judged your resume before they understood your judgment. They judged your silence before they recognized your strength. No one lowered their eyes more quickly than those who had laughed earlier that morning." Victoria continued. "I spoke with people who knew your past. They respected what you accomplished. But what impressed me most was not what you used to do. It was what you chose to become." Ethan remained silent, unsure where the conversation was leading. Victoria reached into the folder and removed a formal employment agreement bearing the company seal. "Ethan Walker, I would like to offer you the position of Director of Executive Protection for Hayes Global." The room erupted into sincere applause. Brandon Cross stepped forward first, extending his hand with genuine admiration. "Congratulations," he said. "They chose the right man." Ethan accepted the handshake with quiet gratitude. "Thank you." Brandon smiled. "I learned more watching you today than I expected to learn all year." Several other applicants approached as well, offering congratulations instead of competition. The laughter that had welcomed Ethan that morning had completely disappeared, replaced by respect freely given rather than demanded. Ethan finally looked toward Victoria. "May I ask one question before I answer?" "Of course," she replied. He took a slow breath. "My daughter finishes school every afternoon at 3:30. If I accept this position, there will be days when she still needs her father before anyone else needs my experience." Victoria's expression softened immediately. "Then we will build the schedule around that responsibility whenever possible." Ethan looked genuinely surprised. "You would do that?" "Victoria smiled. A company can always hire another executive. A child only gets one father." For the first time all day, Ethan laughed quietly. "Then I would be honored to accept." At that exact moment, the front doors opened, and a 12-year-old girl hurried inside after being escorted by a receptionist. "Dad," she called with an excited smile. Ethan turned as his daughter rushed over and wrapped him in a warm embrace. "I knew you could do it," she whispered. Victoria walked over and knelt so she could meet the young girl at eye level. "You must be Emily." The girl nodded proudly. "Yes, ma'am." Victoria smiled. "Your father has spent the entire day protecting people he had never met. I think he learned how to do that because someone very special reminded him what truly matters." Emily slipped her hand into Ethan's, and he looked down at her with quiet gratitude. As they walked toward the exit together, no one noticed the expensive cars waiting outside or the cameras mounted throughout the building. They noticed only a father and his daughter leaving side by side, their footsteps echoing softly through the hall. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is not the loudest voice, the richest leader, or the most decorated professional. Sometimes true strength belongs to the person who quietly chooses dignity over pride, character over applause, and family over recognition. Long after the competition had ended, that was the lesson everyone remembered, and the silence that filled the room was no longer born from surprise. It was born from respect.